Good morning. It's pretty much the middle of the night here. I'm going to guess it's about 3 a.m. on the 19th of March. There's a particular lesson which I think Americans need to know. And I'm going to call you Americans, not citizens of the United States of America. Because there's been a lot of confusion during my life as to what are we? Are we Americans? Or are we United States citizens? Well, they've done a lot of foolery and trickery to us. And in reclaiming our nation and returning to self rule, there's a few principles which you need to know about. There's a few lessons. I'm still not satisfied with this cell phone. It's the top of the line cell phone, the best available in Samsung. The camera angle is pretty strange. I never seem to be able to get it lined up. So we'll take it for what it is. I mean, when I get into it, it's a strange angle here. When I turn it this way, I'm straight onto it, but yet, it's still off at an angle. So I'm not liking this very much. And also the headset, Bose has a lousy policy where I have to return these first, then they'll ship me a replacement headset. It should be the other way around. They should ship me the replacement headset first, and then I should be able to ship these back in. I can't recommend Bose, and I can't recommend Samsung either. You may wonder, what can I recommend? Well, I recommend that you understand the difference between rebellion and revolution. There was a fellow named Gray Clark, a pastor, kind of an odd fellow, not very likable guy. He loved playing basketball. He was pretty extreme in some of his views, and I don't want to flag this video by bringing his racism to the forefront here. However, he knew his literature and he knew his history, and I did get a very valuable lesson from him that I think you need to know. The American Revolution was not a rebellion. It was not a bloody revolution whereby we rose up against the king. It actually was a war of self-defense. Now, I believe that the principle that we need to embrace is that Yahweh, Creator, Father God, will not bless rebellion. However, he does bless self-defense. And that's precisely what it was. Oh, it's cold here at night right now. Got the vents open. It's nice weather. It's going to get a little colder. So what had occurred is that the colonies were being attacked, and we were being marauded primarily by the French, who had a navy, and we didn't have a navy. We didn't have any military. Not much, anyway. We just had ourselves, and we were stuck on the land, so we couldn't defend against, ocean-going vessels that had cannons. It just wasn't going to happen. We didn't have any ships. Also, the French Canadians were sending the Indians against us, and that wasn't a very good deal either. And being that we were colonies and loyal subjects to the king, we appealed to the King of England to defend us, because under the law of nations, under Vattel's law of nations, the king is obligated to defend his subjects. And we wrote letters for years, approximately 4 years. We wrote letters appealing to the king. Defend us. Please come to our aid. And the king abandoned us. And the king actually gave us our independence, and we didn't want it. We didn't choose independence. It was thrust upon us. He abandoned us. He refused to defend us, and he let us go free. He let us have our independence. And later, after we successfully were defending ourselves, to a certain extent, the King of England changed his mind. And he decided to go after us. He wanted us back. And he attacked us. Not only did he attack us, but to just give you an example of the genocidal historical facts, the king put a bounty on us. So if the Indians went and got our scalps, and handed them in, the bounty was kind of racist, I guess, folks. The bounty, there was a triple bounty put on long blonde hair. Now you may say, why long hair? Well, they wanted to kill our women. They wanted to kill the means by which we could reproduce and become a great people. And they went after blondes in particular because that is the sign of the line of Adam, the line of Seth. And sadly, these guys that were going after us were either from the line of Cain or had handlers from the line of Cain. So they recommended to the king, put a triple bounty, in other words, 3 times the bounty that you would put on a man, on a short-haired scalp. You put triple the bounty on long blonde hair and double the bounty on the other colors of hair, long brunette hair, long redheads, only worth $200. And men were worth $100, short scalps. And so that was an attempt to cut down the number of women that we had and our ability to multiply, to be fruitful and multiply. In contrast, the French Revolution was a bloody revolution. It was actually manipulated by the Jacobins. It was set up in a horrible way. It was a very nasty affair, a lot of bloodshed, some reports of strange perversions during that as well. Really strange perversions reported during the Bolshevik Revolution and in the genocides of the White Russians that occurred afterwards. You should read about that stuff. I really don't want to state what happened here, but 100 million people killed, and they were killed because of their race, because of their descendantry, because they were from Israel. The enemy goes after us, folks, and they're going after us today, and they're harming us very directly. So the principle is that our war of revolution, well, the principle is God does not bless rebellion. The angels rebelled in heaven, cast out of heaven, or did they leave on their own, or were they driven? We're going to get into that a little bit. I don't know about today. But the fact is that God doesn't bless rebellion. But our revolution was a return, a revolving to self-rule. It was just a return to our self-rule, and it was a war of self-defense, which Creator Father Yahweh blessed, and we got our independence. So I don't want you to think that we need to rise up in violent, bloody rebellion. As a matter of fact, I recommend that we not do that. The sad thing is that every day that goes by, we get weaker. The enemy kills more of us. There's fewer of us. The population is diluted, and they've got us all marked out anyway. They call us white supremacists. I'm sorry, folks. I've been around the country. I'm not seeing white supremacists. Yeah, I run into some oddballs here or there, but I'm not running into any organized white supremacy groups. I think it's a false charge. The only group that I hear that call themselves the supreme race, well, ask David Duke. He wrote a book about Jewish supremacy, and that's all I see, folks. I need you to understand that we have to defend ourselves. They're using silent weapons, very secret, subtle weapons on us. We are in war. We have been in war pretty much constantly for all of my life. They've used nuclear, chemical, and biological against us, and even radio magnetic types of stuff, radio waves, microwaves. They've used all of that against us in subtle ways. Now, I have recently tried changing to a raw food diet again. Sprouts. Victor Kulvinskas was a physicist, and he wrote a book called Survival into the 21st Century. Victor's still alive. He lives in Costa Rica. You can call him, look up Victor Kulvinskas on the internet. He's got a stateside cell number. He's a gracious man. He's older. He loves contact. He likes to help people. He just recently was given an award by the Essenes. The Essenes are a pretty low-profile group. And so congratulations, Dr. Victor Kulvinskas, on your award. Victor Kulvinskas, in his book, he wrote that he had done the calculations as to the genetic damages that would be caused by a nuclear war, and also the genetic damages that would be caused by the pesticides that were used in our agriculture, by our standard agricultural practices of using all of these chemicals and pesticides. Victor Kulvinskas, physicist that he is, came to the conclusion that there was more damage caused by the pesticides and the prevailing agricultural accepted methods than there would be in the event of a nuclear war. So we have had that going on with us for a long time. And just to give you an example, back when I was eating raw foods and I was doing vegetarian diet and a lot of yoga back in my 20s, the fog in my mind would lift and clear up after a couple of weeks of being on a good diet. Otherwise, the standard diet off our supermarkets had so many chemicals in it that it was like a film over the mind. I just didn't think as clearly. My perceptions weren't as good. It felt like I was living in a mass of kind of like oil, if you will. It just distorted things that much. It slowed me down that much. It dulled my thinking that much. I recommend that you do a diet of sprouts, a diet of raw foods. I recommend that you eat simple foods. These processed foods, they put chemicals in those, and even though they're not killing us from eating it directly, they diminish us over time. In the Bible, we used to live a long time. I don't remember how long Adam lived. I think it was 900 years. Methuselah was the longest living man in the Bible in history, and I believe he lived 969 years. Well, at one point in the Old Testament, God says that he's going to limit man's life to 120 years. Well, folks, what's happened since then? We don't even make 100 years, generally speaking. Most of us don't make it that far. That's because we're being downgraded, we're being attacked. It's a biological, chemical, electromagnetic, radiation type of war. Very subtle weapons. You need to be able to defend yourselves, and defense does mean you have to be able to hold your ground, but you got to have ground to hold. Most of us don't own any property anymore. We've got certificates of title. We don't have real titles to the property. You need to read your Bibles. Yahweh says that when those people who are called by his name turn to him and pray to him, he will return to us. The other thing is that the basic blessing is that he fights our battles. or at least comes to our aid. But the old stories where he actually went and fought our battles for us physically. There were stories about how when the Israelites were approaching the enemy in battle, that some big guy in the back would come running forward past all the Israelites, go up and take about 85% of the enemy out. And they said that was God, that was Yahweh doing that. And so he actually physically fought for us according to the old stories and the old myths. And that's passed on by word of mouth. It's really not quite in the Bible as far as I can tell. So you really need to arm yourself up. You need to read the Bible. You need to understand who the enemy is. You need to understand who you are, who we are. You need to understand what the natural law is, the laws that Yahweh gave us at Mount Sinai. In case you're wondering, it looks as though Mount Sinai really referred to a visitation from space, and that craft was called the Mount. Pastor Paul Burnham passed away approximately a year and a half ago. He said that the name of the spaceship was the Mount. You weren't allowed to touch the Mount. You weren't allowed to watch under the Mount. You couldn't crawl on the Mount, get on the Mount. And it was the crawling under the Mount in particular that was the cue that this was the name of a spaceship. I don't know if I agree with that. It's one of the wildest ideas I've ever heard in my life. I'm open-minded, folks. You got to be open-minded. I think it's important that we see these things for what they are. Now, as far as there being aliens, what do you think fallen angels would be? I mean, how would you classify a fallen angel? Is it a being from another dimension? Is it a mighty one? An alien with advanced technology or an advanced development? All kinds of powers that we don't have, that we usually don't have? I don't know. The word is that a third of the angels rebelled with Lucifer, with Satan, and were cast out of heaven, cast down to the earth. In the books of Enoch, we have it documented that 200 fallen angels gathered on Mount Hermon and conspired together. And that conspiracy is in Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. It's more specifically delineated in the books of Enoch, which were not put in the Bible for some reason. I believe there are 5 books. I don't have them. I wished I did. The original sin was that union and that hybridization. Apparently, the fallen angels, or Lucifer, or that particular angel, decided he wanted to become a member of Yahweh's family, to become God, perhaps even. That's what it says pretty much in the Bible. He wanted to elevate himself above Yahweh. Well, I believe that there's a lot of credence to the concept that Michael the archangel, who was the defender of Israel, took on the enemy in outer space, and they had a space battle, and it probably was just outside of the Earth, outside of orbit of the Earth, because I believe there were 3 large spacecraft that Michael drove to the surface of the planet. And that would be approximately 50,000 years ago, in my estimation, according to the teacher and Dr. James Wickstrom. That was 70,000 years ago. According to Pastor Wesley Smith, the first mention of the black woolly-haired ones was written down by the Chinese. That was about 50,000 years ago, according to Wesley Smith. Dr. Swift. Dr. Swift spoke with a peculiar style of delivery, very rapid, very penetrating. Initially, all I could pay attention to was that sound of his voice and how he rattled off all of these facts and advocated all of this stuff. That was kind of amazing. It was only later that I realized that he actually did get into the scriptures and cite the scriptures. For the longest time, I didn't think he even cited the scripture. I was really worried about him not being biblical. Pastor Paul Burnham criticized Wesley Swift as being an animalist or naturalist, or in other words, he was too much into the earthy realm and not enough into the heavenly realm. So the first mention of the black woolly-haired ones in the Chinese records were approximately 50,000 years ago. And the basic entry was that we did not see them until the appearance of the white devils. Now, in case you're wondering, the word in Chinese for Caucasian in their language means white devils, and we translate it as Caucasians. Well, it turns out that the devils that they had, the white devils that they had, were a bigger version of us. They were giants, and apparently they were cannibals, and they wreaked havoc over there. According to Wesley Swift, they actually worshipped these dragons. They referred to them as dragons. And in China, they actually go after dragon's teeth. And they're not going after a reptilian. They're going after these giants, and they're going after the teeth that they have. Why is that? One of the most valuable substances on the planet. It is said they take the teeth, they powder it up, and they sell it on the market, and it's very rare and very expensive. It's believed that those people, the descendants of the line of Cain, are trying to keep up their strength of their original DNA from the fallen angel Gadriel, who seduced Eve. And they do that by eating the powder of these dragon's teeth and trying to ingest this DNA to keep it strong within them. They also mate among each other, trying to keep up their strength in their DNA. What we don't know is a lot, folks. We don't know a lot. There were different types of giants back then. There were different races of giants, if you will, different species. And we had Mongoloid giants, and we had Caucasoid giants. We had giants that were, just a little bit taller, 7 feet, 9 feet taller. We had giants that were 14 feet taller. We had giants that were 25, 26 feet taller. And the biggest giants were maybe 70, 75 feet. Again, this is a combination of conjecture and estimations and just good guesses, because the skeletons that we found on the planet, well, the Smithsonian takes them and they disappear. For years, we were thinking they just destroy these because they don't want people to understand that these things really existed. The state of Ohio's got the mounds. Those are supposed to be burial mounds for the giants there. The Indians in North America have folklore. They describe the giants as they were red-haired in particular. Very big dudes. There was a woman who went into a cave with another group in New Mexico, and she said that there were mummies inside the caves, and there were these big dudes that were 7 feet tall, and they were massive. They looked like they weighed 400 pounds. She said that the interesting thing is that the skulls on them were like paper mache. In other words, they were not very thick skulls. They weren't as tough as these skulls, or as tough as the Dragon Man, which is a recently discovered humanoid that existed about 80,000 years ago before it went extinct. Well, these skulls of the giants in the caves in New Mexico were described as paper mache. Paper mache is thin. It's kind of like a hard kind of cardboard. It breaks easily. It's very vulnerable. Now, in my estimation, I synthesize things, so here's how I put it together, folks. Goliath was destroyed with a rock, probably to the forehead, a rock to the skull, a well-placed rock from a sling, and that's all it took to break his skull. So my thinking is that he might have had a paper mache skull. He might have been like one of these giants, the bodies of which are still in the caves in New Mexico that we're not allowed to know about. We're not supposed to know about. Another thing you need to know, and I'm surprised I'm here already, is that in the Bible, the stories are about David and Goliath. This is one of those internal validity, internal consistency problems that the Bible has. Because when we read the Bible carefully, we discover a little tiny slip, if you will, in which a man of a different name is the one who took on Goliath. And then I believe his name began with an E. I think it was Ethan. I'm not sure about that. It's one of those things that on my next read through the Bible I'm going to be looking for, because I want to dog ear that page and mark that up so I can remember it and cite it. So there was a lot of pomp and circumstance and glory attributed to King David. And it appears as though it was a different man that stood his ground against Goliath. So there's a little inconsistency there. The Bible is a translated book. Men translated it. And not only that, some of the men that were part of the translating teams and working on it were descendants of Cain, and they had good cause, good reason to distort the record and change things on us. Now, in my travels and visits and meeting people, I think Dr. Wigstrom said that the claim was that Genesis was out of order, that the verses were not in the proper order, that somebody had edited it and put those in the wrong order. What we do know and what's consistently accepted is that the book of Genesis isn't the oldest book in the Bible. The book of Job is the oldest book in the Bible. And when we look at Genesis, I do think things are a little bit out of order. We have what the modern church calls the original sin. Now, I don't want to demean that, because I want us to understand the same thing and be on the same page, but I disagree with that. I don't think that was the original sin. I believe that occurred in Genesis 6:1, and that was when the fallen angels, the fallen ones, conspired among themselves to go into the daughters of men because they found the daughters of men fair, and they wanted to have sex with them, and they wanted to reproduce. So I believe that happened first. However, I remain flexible. Perhaps the story of Eve being seduced occurred first. Maybe that occurred historically first before the angels gathered down Mount Hermon. There's a lot we have to learn, a lot that we don't know. It's going to take a lot of reading and a lot of study. The Bible has been highly edited. It has been altered. The words and the meanings don't mean the same. The words for man and men are not the same in the original text, the original words. We translated a whole bunch of different words as men and man and men. There were different phrases for different groups, different species, different races, whatever you want to call it. When you open up the Bible, you'll see quite a bit, and you'll see that perhaps the word species fits better than the word race. And of course, these modern scientists will argue that, when you cross species, well, they can't reproduce, they're sterile. Folks, that's not true. That's kind of a weird thing that they put on us, claiming it in the name of science. I believe that fallen angelic DNA was dominant. I believe it was stronger than any human DNA. We know that when, that among the races that the weakest DNA is Caucasoid, it's more regressive. We know that the dominant DNA is Negroid DNA. It tends to dominate, so the offspring tend to have more Negro features than Caucasoid features in general. We know that the Asiatic DNA is probably right in the middle. It's probably stronger than the Caucasoid DNA and probably not as strong as the Negroid DNA. We know that when you and I refer to the Asiatics, and we call them by the wrong ethnicity, the wrong country of origin. They get very upset because we can't tell the difference, and they're just like everybody else. They want to be recognized for who they are and what they are. So when we fail to distinguish the Koreans from the people, the Siamese people of Thailand, the modern name from Siam, Thailand, there's a little bit of problems over that. Probably no other group is prouder than the Japanese. When I went to the United States International University, they were one group that didn't want to mix with anybody. The Chinese like to stay to themselves. They have a very stable phenotype at this point. They pride themselves on that. I believe that Japheth, the son of Noah, the middle son of Noah, I believe. Shem was the oldest for certain. But I believe that Japheth did visit Japanese islands and that he took wives there, and I think that that's what they're proud of. They love their identity. They like who they are, and they want to keep themselves that way. And of course, Japheth, Japan. There's some sensitivities to it. Noah had 3 sons. I know that in the Bible, or the modern churches, and especially our Department of Treasury, imagine that. The Department of Treasury wants to dictate what's taught from the Bible. Well, they do want to do that, and if you're a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, church corporation registered by the government, you have to do all sorts of things. You have to make reports to the government. You have to report on your people. You've got to keep records on them. If anybody acts up or is kind of weird, you're supposed to report those to Big Brother. Perhaps and of course, there's the financial aspects and the contributions. They do all that to control us. There was a church in Shell City, Missouri. It was called the Church of Our Heritage, or Heritage Church, something to that effect. And they had to give up their name in order to not be a 501c3 because they didn't want government regulation. So they went by the name Church of Israel because of that. They didn't have a choice. The government made them a 501c3, and the man from the Treasury went out several times, and Pastor Dan Gayman's told me the story. It's for another time, but the basic gist of it was that at the end of it, the Treasury Department government agent, the government man, said, well, you're going to preach that all men came from Adam, right? And Pastor Gayman confided in me, told me that he told him, no, that's not biblical. So there are different peoples on the planet. And is there anything wrong with that? Is there something wrong with the fact that we are different? We're told to take pride in our diversity. Is there something wrong in particular with we and white? Come on, folks, that's not right. But that's the systemic racism that I detect in this country of ours. You can't discriminate against anybody but whites. You can discriminate against white men. We're not allowed to have jobs. We're not allowed to have, equal consideration. They talk about white privilege. I don't see much of white privilege, but I do see a lot of black privilege. And sadly for the blacks, we've now got Asiatic privilege, whereby the Asiatics are outperforming them. And they've got minority status as well, so that they displace the others when it comes to college admissions. Folks, I think all of that stuff, the equal opportunity, all of that racist stuff needs to go by the wayside. We need to level the playing field. We need to get rid of the 14th and 15th Amendments. There is no equality. As far as I can tell, what they did is they institutionalized racism against white people. And so we don't have equal opportunity. We don't have a fighting chance for our children. they don't have a fighting chance. They're always placed one down. And look at these corporations and look at their policies, look at the commercials. I mean, all I see is dumb man commercials. I won't buy anything from Toyota because it's always a dumb man being presented. The only one with any smarts in any commercials, even on conservative, like Glenn Beck's doggone shows. His wife is smarter than he is and told him to try this pain relieving stuff. It is so deep. The brainwashing is so massive that none of us escapes it, not even Dr. Kent. I don't escape it. We're stuck with the language traps that they gave us, with the assumptions that they stuck us with, which of course in turn guide us and lead our thinking to peculiar conclusions that they want us to have. So when you think you're thinking, folks, you can't even trust it because you don't know if you're thinking the way they want you to think, which in most of our cases is the way it is, including in my case, or if you're thinking for yourself. They have us all fooled. They have us all programmed up to be narcissistic, to think that our opinions matter so much that we should regard the other person's opinion is equal to theirs. Folks, what happened to preferences? What happened to likes? What happened to conscience? If you can't discuss things freely and openly, then how do you know you're thinking for yourself? How can you grow? How can you develop? If you're, when I went to the universities, it was fantastic. We had debates. Nobody was offended. We argued from one side to the other side, and quite often when we had long conversations, we found ourselves changing sides. And it was refreshing. It was wonderful. We walked off with a lot of respect for each other. We walked off feeling refreshed. Nobody was offended. We had a good conversation. We got it deeply into the philosophy of things. We actually traded sides for a little bit during those days. And it was just amazing because we didn't come up with all the answers, but we came off with a great respect for each other. We came off with a better intellectual understanding, having exercised our minds. You're not allowed to do that today. You can't think for yourself. You certainly can't engage somebody in a conversation and do intellectual arguments. Logic, you're not allowed to do that. It all has to be feelings-based. And believe me, there's nothing worse than a man who has been reduced to his feelings. I mean, how do you feel about that? I'm sorry, but as a psychologist, that's one of the worst questions in the world. How does that make you feel? How do you feel about that? So we even put people and pigeonhole them into this emotional trap, the emotional traps and all that now. Now, ladies, I know it's different. I know that you understand feelings much better than we men do. Your ability to identify and to label and to put words on your feelings are much better than what we men have. You're the experts at it. Okay, you're greater than we are in that particular realm for sure. But we are supposed to be anchors for you. We're supposed to keep you, we're supposed to be rooted. We're supposed to be able to stand our ground. And you're supposed to be able to dance around us, if you will. You're supposed to be able to be yourselves and rely upon us to keep you anchored, to keep you grounded. You know, we're supposed to be a team. Are men supposed to dominate women? Well, yes and no. I mean, it's a team. You've got to understand we've got roles. We have particular predispositions. We have strengths. We have weaknesses. We're supposed to shore each other up. And that's the way it was during the 1800s when everybody worked on the farm. Men weren't going off and working long hours of the day. Children weren't put into schools, or if they were, the parents dominated the school system. They told the teachers what to do. They hired and fired the teachers. And the nice thing about it was that if there was a problem with the children, Dad was there. It wasn't like Mom was doing it all on her own. You know, both parents were available all the time. Better outcomes. As a matter of fact, back then, a woman's handiwork actually brought in more cash to the family than the man's work did. Men usually raised crops, grain, cattle, um, and these were big items, and they were usually bartered. They were usually traded away for other items that the family needed. Whereas the woman, with her needlecraft, her sewing, or selling eggs, uh, she was bringing in more cash money than the husband was. But folks, it was a team. And the team was ruined by the Industrial Revolution and by all this social engineering in the last century in particular. We need to get back to the team. So you need to stop thinking that Adam is to blame for the fall. You need to stop thinking that Eve is to blame for the fall. You need to realize that the dudes that are to blame for the fall were the fallen angels. They're the ones that left their first estate. They're the ones that broke natural order. They're the ones that violated natural law. That's where the blame belongs. We are going to get into the original sin as preached from the pulpits. I'm going to try to exhaust that with you, at least to the limits of my understanding. There's other books out there, extra biblical books, that'll give you even greater understanding. We do have limited data. We have limited records. We do have the death of Cain in the Bible. It's alluded to. Lamech killed him in a hunting accident. But that story is out of the Bible in one of the other books that we didn't put in it, which should be part of the Bible. You need to buy my Bible, folks. It is definitely the best. You're going to have Yahweh's name, Yahshua's name. You're going to have the Messiah, the proper title. It will help you to think. You'll have... It's a better Bible with better reference, because the word God and the words Lords can refer to different Lords and different gods, and that can be confusing. I believe that by knowing the proper name, it helps us all. We're discovering things in the Bible. Things in the Bible are coming to life much larger than before. We should be able to make more logical sense of it as time moves on. Real science, archaeology, is blossoming. It's being sat on by the evil ones who own and run the planet. They own and run you and me too, folks. They actually really do that. I know you think you're free men and free women, but I got news for you. The birth certificates and social insurance, social security are all part of their systemic traps for us. Yes, they've stolen everything. They've stolen it all. They're sociopaths. As our culture deteriorates, there's more sociopaths among us. I've had some bad incidents with sociopaths. I'm going to tell you about some things in due time, but I've got to lay the groundwork for you. Be careful out there. Be grateful for what you have. I don't have much, folks, and I have to dwell on what I do have out of gratitude, because so much has been stolen from me. It's just not funny. I don't sleep well because of that. My stomach churns because of that. I kick myself for being such a sucker and succumbing to that. I should have known better. I didn't pay attention to Yahweh. I didn't pay attention to the Spirit. I let other people dominate me, and they worked together against me. It was a conspiracy. And we're all victims of different conspiracies in this society today. We have to turn to Yahweh. We have to pray. We have to beg Him to rescue us, to help us. And we have to help ourselves too. We've got to turn in His direction. And we've got to start living the way that we know is better. Well, I hope you all get something out of this. Please like and share the video. I don't have many videos up there, but I'm just going to keep putting them out there. I think at least I'll be leaving a record. I'm hoping that it will last for a while. I'm hoping some of you will wake up and realize that you are Israel. The purpose of my life is to bring you this new Bible and to awaken you to your heritage. The fact that you, most of you who are watching this and listening to me, you are Israelite descendants. And those of you who are perhaps not so obviously Israelite descendants, you probably got a little bit of Israelite DNA in you as well. You've had the advantage of our inventions, the advantages of the languages we created, that we invented. Oh, by the way, one thing about Paleo Hebrew, they didn't come up with their own alphabet. It was the Phoenician alphabet. And in case you're wondering, from my reading, the best I can determine, those languages came out of a place you wouldn't suspect. Not when you read the Bible. Who thinks about Polynesia when you read the Bible? I don't. But that language appears to be from the seafaring folks who survived the floods a long time ago, and they originated in Polynesia. From what I can tell, that's where they started from. So I don't know how many floods ago that would have been, how many recycle periods. As I told you, about 11,500, 12,000 years is one big period, and we're coming to that right now. 26,000 years is another recycling period, and then about 126,000 is a bigger one. There may be even bigger cycles and periods than that. Earth is about 4 to 5 billion years old. In case you're wondering, the evidence is that man, earthy man, has been on the planet for far more than a million years, closer to 2 million years, about 1.75 million years, and that we believe was the Asiatic man, the Mongoloid man. We believe he was here first. Okay, there's different words in the Bible. Enosh, Enoshwi, two different forms for the earthy man. And then we have two different forms of the word for, for Adam. We've got two different words for that species, if you will. I prefer to use the term species. It seems to make more sense. We have different phrases for other groups as well. We appeared here at different times. It looks as though the first ones here were Mongoloids. They were here until the arrival of the fallen angels, of the white devils, folks, of the big Caucasoids. And it's believed that they brought with them the black woolly-haired ones, the Negroids. Now, that's thinking along racist lines, which I don't care for, because when you look at Negroes, there's a lot of variety. You've got tall ones, you've got small ones, you've got a lot of variety among them. Same with Asiatics, there's a lot of variety among them. Caucasians, not so much variety among us, I don't think, except, we do have a wider variety of eye color, hair colors. We've got a whole broader array of ethnicities. It's kind of a mixed up world. At this point, it's very mixed up. As it was said during the days of Noah, so shall it be during the return of the Son of Man. I believe that's Yeshua. Well, my cookie's getting stale, and I'm having kefir to settle my stomach. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion. Feel free to leave suggestions and comments for me. If there's particular ideas that you want to know about, or you want my opinion, or what I think I know about it, I'll be glad to tell you what I can. As we talk more and as I do more of this, I'm hoping that I can get a little bit more activated and really pull some stuff out from that sack of stuff I carry, that bag of things I carry, all the resources I carry around with me, all my experience. I hope I can pull things deeply out of there for you. I grew up during the golden era of the nation. Yet we were deceived during that period as well, because the enemy had already taken us over before I was born, and the enemy just tightened his grip. The year I was born, the Uniform Commercial Code was started, and we now live under the Uniform Commercial Code and not under constitutional law. The year I was born, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Vinson was his name, he was murdered so that another man could become Chief Justice, and they could change the results of cases that were coming before the Supreme Court, so they could really screw us up and damage us even more. So the enemy is walking freely among us. Be careful, folks. You got to read the Bible. You got to learn who you are and learn who they are. All right, I'm going to sign off now. Y'all take care. Enjoy the day.